Let me pause that.
Hi, everyone. This is our November Ed Forum, and I'm very thrilled that we're sharing the time with Scarlett Lewis, who our association goes back a number of years. I'm going to tell a story about how this started. I was on a phone call with a person who we love dearly, both Scarlett and I, and Chris Cook at Western Connecticut State University. And we were brainstorming how it was that not only Western Connecticut State University, but the whole system would become compassionate universities. And in the middle of our conversation, a student ran into his office and said, "Turn on the TV, there's been a shooting." And we stopped, and CNN was turned on, and the shooting was at Newtown, the worst school massacre that we've really experienced. We obviously ended the meeting, came back later to finish it up, and through, I guess, months after that, we continued the conversation. Chris introduced me to Scarlett. And Chris and Scarlett and I did a really extensive workshop series in Seattle, actually. And we had time to spend together, and through the years, we've continued that relationship. And wonderful things have happened with Chris, with Scarlett, and hopefully doing more and more with Scarlett. And one of the things that Scarlett and I did this week with Arnd Wachter, who a number of you know from Crossing Borders, was we participated in the annual Actionable Innovation conference, which is a global conference that involves people actually, really from all over the world. And we were the end. We were able to summarize, the majority of things that occurred during that conference. And it was just a great time. I think that Arndt and Scarlett and I had putting it together and then presenting it. And now I think we're going to consider it as a course for CEI. Just because it, I think, gives the underpinnings of, what are the kinds of skills that you need in order to deal with the present situation in which we find ourselves, and really looking ahead for the kinds of skills that you need that really involve what so many people call soft skills, but they're not. They're really difficult skills to learn. And Scarlett is going to tell you her story, but as importantly, tell you what has followed because of her story. So I'm going to turn it over to Scarlett, because I know that one of these videos that I just saw that came up really does introduce her story. And so, Scarlett, it's all for you now.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story, which I've been doing for the last 10 years now. I can't believe that it's been 10 years since the Sandy Hook tragedy, but of course that day changed my life forever. And I also made a commitment to spend the rest of my life being part of the solution. I did not live my life that way before, but it was the only way that I could see to go forward. So I'm just extremely thrilled to be with everybody here today. I have a presentation that I'm going to be pulling up here, and I'm talking about the power of choice in our life and the power of actually choosing love as a thoughtful response for not only our safety, because that's our number one priority and the number one priority of our brains, of course, but also for our physical health and well-being. I love this quote by Aristotle: educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And as Marilyn said, December 14th, 2012, still the worst mass shooting in an elementary school. And this is my son, Jesse, who died that day, forever changing my life. But I realized that day that didn't have to happen. That was 100% preventable. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years, was working on a proactive and preventative approach. He actually gave me the idea of how to move forward. He wrote a message on our kitchen chalkboard, 3 words: nurturing, healing, love. And I realized that was the solution. It was so simple. If the young man who had attended Sandy Hook Elementary School, if he had been able to give and receive love, if he had felt good about himself, the tragedy would never have happened. It was so simple. But simple, of course, as we all know, isn't always easy. Here's a closer look at this. Just absolutely amazing. And I'm still amazed at this message that came from a 6-year-old. That's the thing. I mean, and the crux of all the research that we know, it's all about connection and a deep sense of belonging, that feeling of safety we get through that, but also the ability to thrive. We're either surviving or we're thriving through connection. And, you know, I made the decision to really be for something, for the most powerful connector in the universe. That's love. The other option would be to fight against things. And I had a surviving 12-year-old son. I actually didn't want to spend my life fighting against something. I saw how previously our focus on what's wrong, our focus on the problem, had simply expanded the problem. So I decided to focus really on the opposite side. So instead of focusing on the attack end of the pathway to violence that the Department of Homeland Security uses, I decided to focus on the grievance end and giving kids, and by the way, big kids too. I consider myself a big kid, and this is a universal language for thoughtfully responding with love. So giving us the skills and tools that we're not born with, that we need to face adversity and grow through it. And, you know, I realized after that tragedy, there is no roadmap for the way forward for me. I had another mom that had lost a child to a shooting, and I'd never met anybody who had lost a child tragically like that. And she started telling me, she was 20 years out. Honestly, it was only a couple of days after Jesse had been murdered. I didn't know if I would survive because the pain was so great. But she showed me that I would survive. But then I started listening to her story, and, you know, just about 5 minutes, and I said, thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for letting me know that I'm going to be okay. But that's your story. That's not going to be my story. I wanted to have joy. I wanted to have wonder and awe in my life. That's what I wanted before. Our family motto was having a lot of fun. I wanted to continue to do that for my 12-year-old son. And so I realized, you know what? I'm going to have to create my own roadmap. And even in that moment, even in the depths of despair and mourning, there was a little stirring of excitement, because I knew that it was my choices that were going to determine what my life looked like on the other side of this great tragedy. So here is a 4-minute intro video. I love this because it shows little video clips of Jesse, and then I will be back. Love those moves. Awesome, Jess. It is August 24th, 2012. And Jess has brand new soccer shoes. So prior to 12/14/2012, I was a single mom with 2 boys. It was kind of an unremarkable life. It was such a great life. You know, I just wanted to be a mom, and I just wanted to be with my kids. Run the ball up to me. One day, you're a mom with 2 boys, 1 boy riding in a car seat in the back seat. So one morning I'm holding hands with my 6-year-old in his car seat, and the next thing that I know. Cut. There is no 6-year-old. He's been murdered. So I had come home for the first time and I was getting Jesse's clothes for the funeral. And I walked through the kitchen on my way out and I noticed these 3 words that Jesse had written on the kitchen chalkboard shortly before he died. He wrote, nurturing, healing, love. These words were a message of comfort for his family and friends and inspiration for the world. It's where we needed to turn. And I knew I'd be spending the rest of my life spreading this message. I believe that Jesse is a part of this organization. I actually believe that he's leading it. And all I have to do is just be present. Live with a tremendous dichotomy in my life every single day. It's never out of my mind why I am leading a worldwide movement to choose love. It's because my 6-year-old son was shot in his first grade classroom alongside 19 of his classmates in one of the worst mass murders in US history. I feel like I meet Jesse a lot in schools. I'll look into a child's eyes and I'll see Jesse looking back at me. And how blessed am I? And how grateful I am that my purpose is spreading a message of choosing love and given to me by my 6-year-old son. So I like to follow that video up with a quote by Nelson Mandela. People must learn to hate. And this is interesting because, I'm talking about love and there's all this scientific research. The latest neuroscience backs this up, that babies aren't born mass murderers. They're not born hating. They have to be taught. And if they can be taught to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. And, people ask me, how did you get, how early did the Choose Love movement start? Well, it started the month after the tragedy. And I say that it started at Jesse's funeral when I got up to speak, because everybody had been asking me, what can I do? And I said, there is actually something you can do. This whole tragedy started with an angry thought in Adam Lanza's head. And I pictured him as a little boy having an angry thought without the skills, tools, or nurturing environment to manage that thought. And that thought, that grievance, that pain grew into what later became the Sandy Hook tragedy. And here's the amazing thing. That thought, that way of seeing and being and feeling in the world, that mindset, that could have been changed anywhere along the way. So I asked the congregation, start to think about what you think about and change one angry thought into a loving thought. I said, by doing that, you'll make yourself feel better, and this will ripple out into the world and make it a safer, more peaceful and loving place. So about a week later, I was getting calls, emails, texts saying that one simple act had completely changed people's lives. And so that's one of the foundational aspects of the Choose Love movement. And this, harkens back to the cognitive triangle. We know that our thoughts directly impact how we feel, which then directly impacts and determines how we show up in our relationships and our behavior. And the fact of the matter is, we have so much more control over this cognitive triangle than we ever imagined. Here's the other thing about this. We know that we're designed as human beings to grow through adversity and tough times and pain in our life. How does the caterpillar get to be a butterfly? This is a slide that I show when I talk to students. Well, everybody knows that it goes into the caterpillar attaches itself to a branch and it weaves a chrysalis. But then if we look, this is a short video. If we watch this video, and actually we can do it while I'm talking. If we watch this video, and I'll turn this down, we see the process that it has to go through to break out of the chrysalis. I'll ask kids, have you ever felt like this butterfly, it's all scrunched up, you know that can't be comfortable, and then it has to break out of this hard casing and it's all scrunched up? It's such a struggle. Have you ever felt like that? Well, everyone, including the educators, raises their hand, because we've all faced pain and struggle in our lives, and there's a reason for it. That is what gets us out of our comfort zone into our growth zone. That's when we learn and grow. It's through struggle. So rather than resisting and avoiding and being afraid of it, we can actually understand that it's there for a reason and a purpose, assign a different meaning to it, get the courage that it takes to face the difficulty, and get even curious, like, okay, this is happening. How am I going to grow through it? Because in actuality, it's growth because of the struggle, not despite it. So we know that you've heard no pain, no gain. Well, it's really true. And there's actually a scientific term for it. It's called post-traumatic growth. The amazing thing is, most people have heard of PTS. It used to be called post-traumatic stress disorder. They took the disorder off. Now it's post-traumatic stress. But there is something called post-traumatic growth that the vast majority of us experience when we go through difficulty. And there's a lot of research behind it, by the way, and all the different ways that we grow, yet most people haven't even heard of it. And there's a reason. And we're going to talk about the way that we think in a moment, and why we're focused on post-traumatic stress and how it can harm us. But we know really our personal power as human beings is our ability to choose from moment to moment how we thoughtfully respond. Now, harken back to after the tragedy. I couldn't choose what happened to my son, but I could choose how I thoughtfully responded to it. That's when we take our personal power back as humans. And this is translated into what we teach in the Choose Love movement. We can't always choose what happens to us. That's a reality. However, we can choose how we thoughtfully respond. And we're responding really from love or fear. And we could stop there and just say, choose love, and go have fun with that. The problem is the way that we're wired to think and the way our brains are wired. It's not really a problem. It's actually a good thing. Our brains are wired to keep us safe. So we actually have a negative bias. In caveman times, and by the way, we still have the same caveman brain. We do not have a brain that can handle all this information. We were scanning for saber-toothed tigers, and we still have the same brain. We're scanning now for negativity. And we know this through neuroscience too, like our brains are Velcro for negativity, Teflon for positivity. Positive things just bounce off us. This translates into our thoughts. The vast majority of our thoughts are negative, and over 95% are repetitive. So it's that roiling negativity that sometimes we find ourselves captured in. And, it's really through no fault of our own. It's the way that our brains are wired. We just have to be aware of it to overcome it. The importance, however, can't be lost on you. Every single thought we have, and we have tens of thousands of thoughts a day, impacts us on a cellular level. That means every thought is impacting us and leading us towards languishing or flourishing. So we really need to be mindful of our thoughts. Now, we could end there, except let's talk about the way our brains are wired. Information comes into all of us through our 5 senses, and it is filtered through our fear center first. because our fear center is 4 times faster. Sometimes some people say 7 times faster than our prefrontal cortex, where logic and reasoning reside, our executive functioning, and the brake on our instinctive impulses, our prefrontal cortex. But information is coming through our fear center first. And so if our brain believes that there is something that might harm us, and by the way, not just physically, but emotionally too, what does it do? It shuts off the blood flow to the prefrontal cortex and keeps you in freeze, fight, or flight, keeps you in defensive mode. And I think, by the way, this is an example of what's going on in today's world. Lots of people are stuck in their fear center, and they're making decisions from there and not their prefrontal cortex. So basically, we're either in fear or love. And who the boss of us is, we wear on our sleeves, don't we? Like if we see somebody that's angry and acting out, well, we know that they're coming from a place of fear. And so we can feel compassion for them, actually. And the fact of the matter is, we need to take control of our narrative, because we're constantly questioning ourselves, questioning our worth, questioning our value, questioning if we're enough. And that's our brain just trying to keep us safe. It translates into how we even talk to ourselves. So we just need to be mindful, and we need to say, thank you, brain. I know you're just trying to keep me safe. I know you don't want me to fail. You don't really want me to succeed either, because then there's a higher chance of failure, but I got this. Thank you very much. I want to be safe, but I also want to succeed. I love that Marcus Aurelius even said, our life is what our thoughts make it. Such an important concept. And your response is actually a reflection. Your thoughtful response to what's happening in your life is a reflection of how you feel, because how you feel directly impacts your behavior, but also your level of character, social, emotional development. And we always have to remember, it's a choice. It's a choice how we treat one another. It's a choice. I do a lot of work in prisons. They never knew it was a choice. And when they know they had a choice to love, it blows their mind. That's why that's some of my favorite work. So what's the most important lesson we need to teach kids and big kids? How to love ourselves. So that when we have those questioning things, when people give us a divisive look, we're not taking it personally. We're not thinking, yes, I am not enough. I am not worthy. We know that we're worthy. We know that we are enough, and we can change the narrative that goes on inside of us. One of the models that we use in the Choose Love movement is called the choice moment. So when something happens, we have 2 choices. We can react when that information comes in through our fear center. We have 2 choices. We react. And when we react, by the way, we react through memory and habit, mostly. And so, by the way, those are heavily weighted towards negative memories, right? Because what is your brain? Your brain wants to remember the negative stuff so that it won't happen again. And habits, and these don't always serve us. Or we can get into what we call the choice moment. The choice moment. We know what that is, the present moment. It's the moment where I say, we need to live to have the fewest regrets in our life is in the present moment. And by the way, giving love to our, being present with the ones that we love, looking them in the eyes. And that's the way to live life with the fewest regrets. But in this choice moment is where we can pause and we can get curious about what's happening. Remember, this also gives us time to get our prefrontal cortex online. Our fear center is 4 times faster. So we actually, I don't know about you, but unless I'm running from something and my life is in danger, I want to be making decisions from my prefrontal cortex. So this pause gets us in the present moment, and we can thoughtfully respond with love. And it is a heroic choice. We call it a heroic choice because our brain wants us to react, and our brain rewards us with a hit of dopamine by reacting, but we actually get a lasting lift of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphin called the happiness quartet, a lasting lift of nurturing, healing love when we thoughtfully respond with, say, forgiveness, maybe of a dirty look, and then compassion. Hey, I know you. Why, all right, I don't know you. Why would you give me a dirty look? What's going on? Oh, I'm having a hard time. Oh, what can I do to help? You see how thoughtfully responding with what we call the formula for choosing love, which we're going to go into in a minute, really kind of de-escalates a situation and could even deepen a relationship. Here's the dose of nurturing, healing love. There's so much neuroscience and so much that our brain does for us when we thoughtfully respond with love. Getting a dose as an acronym of nurturing, healing love through this happiness quartet gives us our body's natural mood stabilizer, our body's natural painkillers, and also a bonding agent on top of all of that, as well as a reward or pleasure neurotransmitter. It's a really good thing to thoughtfully respond with love. And we can see this in action. There was actually a study done in a middle school where they took two corn plants, and this was actually done by the IKEA furniture store, and they put them on opposite ends of a middle school hallway. And they had the middle schoolers, they said, for the next 6 weeks in between classes, you're going to be walking by these plants. We want you to bully one. You can see that they're in contained environments, and we want you to love on the other. So it's really cute. If you pull up the video, it's like these kids are saying, we hate you, corn plant. You're so disgusting. Nobody wants you here. And then for the other corn plant, they're saying, we love you, corn plant. You produce oxygen. We need you. Now, they brought the plants together after the 6 weeks, and take a look at what's happening by just words. Just words. The bullied plant is dying. The plant that received love is twice the size. It's just a beautiful thing. Our thoughts that create our words are just super important. We haven't even touched upon how important our thoughts that impact our words are. But we know that it's all about connection. And, of course, there's been lots of studies done on school shootings, and it all comes back to connection. The sense of connection at school and at home. And, I alluded to, but I have spoken to many school shooters, by the way. I've hosted one on my book club, and I've done a few podcasts with different school shooters. And basically we know that everybody wants to be safe, seen, and celebrated. But if I could boil down all my conversations to one word, it would be seen. These kids are desperate to be seen. And that African proverb that says, if the community doesn't give warmth to the child will come back and burn it down. And I truly believe that's what we're seeing. I alluded to this, but I didn't realize I put the slide in. When we're talking about school safety, when we're talking about workplace safety, when we're talking about everyday safety, we can look at the pathway to violence, which usually starts with a grievance, a pain, a problem that escalates into an attack. And of course, the way that we're wired to think, we focus on the problem. So what has happened? We focused on the attack end, just like we have with the war on drugs in the 70s. We focused on drugs. We focus on the problem. And what we find is the problem grows. And what we really need to do is go down to the root cause. And it's interesting that the root cause of not just violence, but substance abuse, mental illness, so much of the suffering is the lack of love, connection, and belonging, as well as essential life skills like knowing how to have healthy relationships, how to manage your emotions, how to make responsible decisions, things that we're not born with that we have to learn. This is proactive versus reactive. And by the way, how our brains are wired to react. We know the secret to happiness through Harvard University's Grant study, the longest study ever on human life, which showed that the secret to happiness is healthy relationships, meaningful connections. But here's the kicker. We're not born with the ability to know how to do that. We have to be taught, and not just taught, by the way, we have to practice these skills and tools once we learn them for the rest of our lives. And the thing is, I was 44 years old when Jesse was murdered, and I realized very quickly I don't have these skills and tools. And I loved my kids, but I can't give them what I don't have. And so that's where we all come in, where educators and parents and community members come in to not just teach, but also model these essential life skills, because it's not so much what we say, but it's more of what we do, right? And taking personal responsibility for where we are and where we're going. Briefly, I want to touch on anxiety, because if COVID was a pandemic, anxiety is a super, super, super pandemic. And we know from the philosophers to modern cutting edge neuroscience that the opposite of anxiety is positive action. So I wanted to quickly go through the formula so everybody had it as a skill and tool. This is the basis of what we teach. The formula is courage plus gratitude plus forgiveness plus compassion and action, neuroscientifically designed to bring your location of personal power back inside of you, where you can make things happen. And when I talk about courage, I talk about Jesse's courage, the courage to actually stand up to a school shooter that had just murdered his principal and guidance counselor right outside his door and save 9 of his classmates' lives. You saw that in the video. He is a hero. And but here's the thing, we all have the capacity for the courage that Jesse showed, each and every one of us. And hopefully we'll never have to do something like what he had to do. Nobody should ever have to do that. But I'm talking about the courage that it takes to get up every morning and put our best foot forward, even when we don't feel like it. The courage to be kind when somebody's not being kind to you. The courage to pause in between something that's happening, maybe a conflict, and our thoughtful response to get curious, to pause in that present moment. That takes a lot of courage. The courage to face adversity instead of resisting, avoiding, or numbing ourselves. The courage to tell the truth, to do the right thing instead of what's easy, to get curious about what the point of pain is in the other person when they hurt you, because it's always coming from a point of pain. There's so much courage that it takes. And by the way, science tells us courage is like a muscle. We can practice it to strengthen it, which is really exciting. And of course, we put courage first because courage is the most important character value that underlies all the rest of them. The courage to get in between what's happening, and then the courage to be grateful when things aren't going our way. We use gratitude as the great mind shifter. If you're having all these negative thoughts, we know that we're wired to do it. We focus on negativity. But if you find yourself spiraling down and you want to shift out of that, you can think of something you're grateful for. And by the way, you can only focus on one thought at a time. So you can't focus on a negative thought and a positive thought at once. So gratitude's the great mind shifter. And we all know how much research and benefit is behind a regular practice of gratitude. In fact, a regular practice of gratitude creates happiness. We know it's not happiness that creates gratitude, and there's so much behind that. Then, of course, the courage to forgive is really important. I got so much pushback when people heard I wanted to put forgiveness in here, but my choice to forgive the man who murdered Jesse is astonishing to some, but to me, I understand the benefit of that. And there's decades of research behind the benefit of forgiving. In fact, my new and improved definition of forgiveness is simply taking your personal power back, cutting the cord that attaches you to pain. It's a gift that you give yourself. People that don't understand forgiveness, they say, oh, that person, he doesn't deserve to be forgiven. Why should you forgive him for that? There are things that you don't forgive, all these things that I've heard. But in reality, I know that the choice, remember going back to our personal power as human beings, is in our ability to choose. And that forgiveness is a gift to myself. We know through research it's the key to resilience, and that literally it does cut the cord. Amazingly, you see the top scientifically proven benefit is healthier relationships. And remember Harvard University's 85-year now longitudinal study that said that healthy relationships was the key to happiness. We know when you forgive, you have less anger, less anxiety, stress, and hostility, less symptoms of depression, a stronger immune system, improved heart health, higher self-esteem. And by the way, it extends your lifespan, which something has to be really powerful if it does that. Now, the fourth character value, compassion in action. It's when we identify the need in someone and then we act to solve that need. Here's the amazing thing of what science tells us. When we have the courage to step outside of our own busyness, distraction, even our own pain and suffering to help somebody else, amazingly, that helps and heals ourselves. Wow. So just a little bit about Choose Love. We synthesized really the best of what was out there. And we made this programming free for schools, homes, communities, not businesses, because businesses can do their part to help spread these essential life skills. But we have spread this, by the way, word of mouth and referral only. It's been a very organic process, but literally we are trying to create the world that we want to live in, one that is safe, peaceful, kind, and loving. This is a message that Jesse left for his older brother. This is a little note about this big. It was folded up tightly, and JT came home from learning that his brother had been murdered and found this. This was our family philosophy, right? Having a lot of fun. And I thought it was a beautiful message to be left for an older brother, JT, who was 12 years old at the time. But the two most important things that we do every single day, in my opinion, is choosing love as a thoughtful response, because we can choose how we thoughtfully respond. It's how we take our personal power back. And we can't forget to have a lot of fun. That's why we're here. So I'll leave you with anthropologist Margaret Mead's famous quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." So I want to thank you all for choosing love. And I will stop there and open it up for questions and comments. And flash you a little heart sign.
Thanks a lot, Scarlett. That's really a great, I think, overview of what you're doing. I'm wondering, have you had an opportunity to meet with Adam, the shooter?
Oh, so Adam killed himself when he heard the sirens approach. He had killed, he started in Jesse's room, he went to the next classroom, and then he heard sirens. He came back to Jesse's classroom and killed himself. I would have liked to speak to him, but I wasn't able to. And so, but I think there's value in speaking to school shooters, to find out. And I asked the question I think not many people ask, like, how did we fail you? Because you weren't born a school shooter. So what happened between the time that you were born and you committing this heinous act? I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm trying to figure out what happened and what we could have done. What needs went unmet? What could we have done to prevent you from doing this? Those are the questions that I'm asking them.
Yeah, it reminds me so much of the work of Leslie Unwin with Think Equal, and her, her look at starting Think Equal, which is a program most people know here for children 3 to 6 years old. And she was a documentary filmmaker by profession, and she went off to India to film a documentary on the men who raped and basically brought to the end of her life a young medical student on a bus. And so I don't know how many hours she interviewed them. And she just was so, so confused, so depressed about the kinds of answers that she was getting. And basically that this young person out at night with a boyfriend on a bus should not have been there, and she deserved to be killed, to be raped. And so then she went and she asked to interview the lawyers who were defending these young men. And she found out that basically their feelings were the same. And she thought, we have to do something about this. And so she went on this journey of really talking with people and trying to figure out what is it that needed to be done. And I don't know if you know Leslie Unwin, but if you don't, we need to make that connection, because she too has started this movement with very young children, many of whom are not in any school setting, because they're too young to be in a school setting, but they're in maybe a community program or something similar to that. And she too is in a number of countries, not as many as you, but just remarkable kinds of achievements that have been made. And so I'm wondering if you could speak just a little bit more uh, about people who might be in that situation. And, I'm thinking going all the way back to being a classroom teacher in an inner city in Chicago,
Mhm,
and the kind of aggressive behavior
mhm,
that I saw
mhm,
with young children, middle school children. What possesses a young child to pick up a pair of scissors and just ready to stab someone, if there wasn't an intervention, or the fact that I was principal in a school, and I can't tell you how many funerals I went to because of shootings, gang shootings, in particular. Um, and I'm just wondering, as you go into classrooms and you have this extraordinary message of love, what might be the teacher's responses to this very affirmative message? And then they have been working with very, very difficult uh, young people who are very aggressive towards one another, moving it to a certain extent way beyond bullying in so many inner city schools.
Wow, that's a loaded question, Marilyn.
I know, I know.
And yeah, but well, of course, we know that that situation is escalating as well, because I am traveling and I am in schools, and I do know that there are more and more fights,
Mhm.
more and more behavioral issues. And of course, we know that someone's behavior is just a manifestation of how they're feeling and their pain. And so I would say that um, there are always signs, and I think that we're making really good progress about uh, making ourselves aware of the fact that behavior isn't just behavior and acting out. There's a reason behind it. And so going towards the root cause, asking the question, of course, what happened instead of what's wrong with you. Teachers are so incredibly empathetic. I think maybe that's part of the problem, because we know that empathy leads to burnout. And there's lots of issues that they see coming into their classrooms. I couldn't do the job. I say it's the most important job in the entire world. They're literally boots on the ground that see everything that's wrong walking through their classroom. And that's why the other thing that we teach is to move more towards compassion in action, because we know compassion strengthens and energizes and comes from the reward center in the brain, not the pain center. But I will say that um, there are always signs, and there are always signs that were missed or ignored in these cases. I look at almost every case, and I read like everybody else. But I have also, contacted the defense team in a very high profile shooting case to learn more than what was being reported, because of course we know we're not getting the whole story. And uh there's and then of course I went on to talk to the school shooter himself in prison. And it goes back to the slide that I shared, being seen, and like a long history of issues and really not continuing to get the help that they need, not seeing the behavior for what it is and taking it as seriously as it should be. I mean, I think about the circumstance in Virginia recently where a 6-year-old brought a gun into school and shot his teacher point blank. You know, he had made a threat to burn her alive the previous week, and you know, that's showing serious misthinking, and there's something terribly wrong, and that needs to be translated back to the home usually. And of course then we get to the home and we see that there is dysfunction, a tremendous dysfunction there, a reason. There's always a reason, by the way, for the behavior, for the attacks. There's always a reason. And most often there were mistakes that were made, there were things that were overlooked. And in the cases that I've looked into, there's always been a child that's calling out for help, and always, by the way, and they do not receive the help that they need. And you know, and I think that we can't discount the connection and the belonging piece. I think about Adam Lanza and the Sandy Hook school shooter. He attended that school, by the way, that elementary school, in those very same classrooms. And when he was, you know, I can tell you a couple stories. When he was 6 years old, he and his mom made birthday invitations, and he brought them in a backpack, and he passed them to all the classmates. No one came to that birthday. When he was in 5th grade, he wrote a story. He hand wrote it, and the teachers took it in 5th grade. And it was called The Book of Granny. It was about a witch that came to Sandy Hook Elementary School with a broomstick that opened into a semi-automatic weapon that murdered children. And it's like, think about how you would feel if you wrote this, Marilyn. If I sent you an email and I was saying, okay, could you read my story? You would go, whoa, 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 whoa. We need to talk about this, Scarlett. What are your goals in this story? What are you thinking? Why are you thinking this way? What's going on? But if I never got a response from you, I would think justifiably, Marilyn doesn't care. She may have not even opened my email. I don't know, but obviously she doesn't care enough to even respond. And I think that's what Adam felt. He never got a response to that story. It was taken. There was never any follow-up. And here's the other thing. I'll just add one more thing. I think that there are so many mistakes that are made, and we really need to have the courage, and I'm talking about Sandy Hook and on, to share those mistakes so that other people can learn from our mistakes. And it's like, mistakes were made in Sandy Hook, and instead of really kind of exposing those mistakes, we tried to cover them up. We tried to say that there were in the final report, it literally says, after extensive research, there's no sign of bullying. There doesn't take very much research to know that there was bullying. I had classmates of Adam's that came forward and said to me they had witnessed bullying. I'm not sure how the investigators could have missed that, but I think we need to start really taking responsibility for what's happening. It's our responsibility. I realized that when this happened in my community. I'm thinking, this is my son in a school that's in my community. I'm not a victim. I'm responsible for what's happening to our children. And that, but then I realized, and I didn't realize before, wait, I'm responsible for what's happening to all of us. This was like a revelation for me. Wow, wait a minute. We're all responsible for the safety, health, and well-being of our kids. And that means we all have to do something, not from the safety of behind an anonymous handle. We need to actually do something. And here's the incredible thing that I learned. The minute that you get up and you actively take that step forward to do something out of your comfort zone, you feel relief. You feel better. You feel like a surge of self-esteem and self-confidence, and you feel like you can do more. And then our kids also need to see that from us. They need to see us doing something. And we're like, oh, we don't want to talk about it. Nobody talks about the fact that, if their kid goes to school, they could be shot in America, but everybody's thinking it. And by the way, the kids are too. What would it be if parents were like picking up the phone and doing something about it, and their kids were seeing that? It would really change the fearful, anxious environment that we're in.
Yeah. This reminds me of an extraordinary teacher. I think she moved away from Chicago, and she had a fourth grade classroom, and in every one of her years that she taught at this school, she asked the kids to join tables, so that she got rid of all of the traditional kinds of desks, and they only had round tables in the classroom with 6 to 8 kids at a table. They stayed together like that. They were like family units, and then they would come together. And she would meet with like each table would select a leader for a few weeks. And then she would have lunch with those leaders and say, what's happening? How can I help you? Are there problems at your table? It was just really quite amazing. And this is, I had a student teacher that I was in charge of in that classroom. And so I would go and visit like at least once a week. And I remember, oh no, it was second grade. It was second grade. And I was at one of the tables, and the leader for that week or those weeks was trying to help, or they were doing division, and I was trying to help this one child, and she was looking at me. Now, this is a second grader. She's looking at me, trying to help this child with long division. And she came over and she tapped me and she said, I think I better help her. I don't think she understands you. And so, she did. And I mean, it was those moments where you have, what you're talking about in a classroom, where you can really kind of observe. But, as one teacher, you can't possibly, unless there's overt behavior, know everything that's going on. So it does take a small group of parents and ways of communicating with children and students to be, leaders in their own right.
Can
So
I add one thing? I spoke to one school shooter, and this is during our podcast towards the end. I said, it just, sometimes I get so overwhelmed by the systems and processes that have to change. And he said, no, Scarlett, you have it all wrong. It has nothing to do with the systems and processes. It has everything to do with seeing the light of humanity in each other. And then he said, the solution lies in our ability to give love to those we feel deserve it the least. Wow, mic drop right there, because I thought, you're right. And it harkens back to Jesse's message of nurturing, healing, love being the solution, and the fact that we can choose this. We know, I heard this, and I actually think that this was one of the writers of the grant study, but he said, love, awareness is the purest form of love. And I believe that that's true, but it's getting harder and harder. We're so distracted these days, and there's so much information being pumped to us 24/7 that our brains are not designed to handle. We have front row tickets to the worst of humanity in our back pocket now. We have so many things that, are overwhelming, and it's partially the reason that we're anxious. There's an algorithm of fear that works through this. And I think that we really need to slow down and be more present, and be really focused on giving love, which, feeds us and what we need, and what we don't have when those things happen, unfortunately.
yeah. I think there's a question from Lynn. So Lynn, why don't you just ask it?
I just, I think it's a fabulous program. And I think that teachers can spot so many behaviors, and they can, I don't want to say prevent, but they can act to stop bullying in their classrooms. But when a child goes home to an environment that is so difficult that the child returns to school the next morning, and that ugliness and nastiness has just been refilled, I know we all have to start somewhere, but do you work with parents as well? Is there a section of this program that also works with the parents?
There is. We have an online program that teaches parents right alongside the kids. And it's the same language. It's the same formula that I went through. It's the same instructions for the parents as it is for the children. In the elementary school, we have a whole section of every lesson that is meant to be taken home by the children to be shared with the parent. Of course, we know that that doesn't happen every time. And I get that question a lot, Lynn. It's like, what happens to the kids that are going back into a dysfunctional environment? And the thing is, I don't know any other way to solve the problem of the familial dysfunction that, by the way, we know passes through generations, than to go to the basics, teach kids these skills in school, and then you give them this base where if they use it, they can move through that difficulty at home. They can see it for what it is. They can understand in themselves how to move through it. They can try to help their parents, but big kids are really kind of harder sometimes to teach than the little kids. And at least they have this base from which to work with. I did a bus tour. My mom donated an RV during COVID. And of course, I couldn't go into school. So we wrapped this bus in student artwork and we took it out on the road. And we went everywhere that would take us, literally like pulling up to a school in the parking lot and putting out tables so that the teachers and kids could go through and practice the formula and feel what it felt like they did courage poses with first responders, and they wrote gratitude letters, and they put down their pain on pieces of paper at the forgiveness table and then crumpled them up and threw them away. We worked with local 501c3s to pack bags for the homeless and different things. I think it's not just teachers. We can't just put this on teachers' backs because they're doing so much already. The parents have to be involved. Of course, we can't control that, but we also have the community involvement as well, and role modeling for our kids. How do you think they learn to bully? I mean, they're not born bullies. They're learning this behavior by what they're seeing, not just, and maybe not even at home, but in the movies that they watch online, through the discourse that they're seeing. People treat each other horribly, and by the way, we're responsible for modeling what healthy relationships and meaningful communication looks like for our kids. So we're teaching them all of this. So the community has to get involved too. Every single one of us has to take responsibility. Right now, I see a lot of blame, finger pointing, fault finding, name calling, amazingly, from adults. And I think really what we need to get down to is, hey, it's partially my responsibility, this world that I live in, and I need to take responsibility for it and start being part of the solution instead of part of the problem.
The visual that I always have is, how in kindergarten, I think you probably all did the same. You made like a garland, for someone's birthday, and it was like a piece of paper like this, and then the next piece of paper, and I always think of us, each and every one of us, as the last loop in that link.
I love that.
Marge?
Yeah, I just thank you so much, Scarlett. I have heard you. I was at the Parliament of Religions, so I heard you there at the Charters banquet. But I thank you for, again, doing this. One of my focuses is really on creating the environment where it's more probable that we will act in love. We will be able to connect. And, if a child or an adult is hungry, if they're dealing with mental health issues, if they don't have hope, if there's all those things, it makes it really difficult to act in love, act as like we would, act well. And I think the onus is on all of us to ask, demand systemic change that we don't have. We should not have here. Sorry, I'm Canadian, but it doesn't matter. North American.
I agree.
We should not have hungry people.
I agree.
We shouldn't have that. We should have health care. We should have mental health care.
I agree.
There shouldn't be people sleeping on the streets. When I see a homeless person, I automatically feel, where did we feel? That was, as you said, a happy little boy in somebody's home. And
Yes.
now it's like, what? We wasted potential. And
Yes.
so, I guess my focus really is on, let's make, what do we do to make an environment where we can be loving and choose easier. We all have the capacity, even in harsh environments. We've read about the Viktor Frankl, and in the prisons, and he was able to do that.
Right.
But not everyone can. And what
Yeah.
can we do to create environments that are more create love? So,
I actually had somebody very early on come up to me after a presentation, and she said, you should be feeding kids. That's where it starts. Kids should not. And I said, I understand that there are very many needs. This is my calling to spread this message. But I also believe that the children that go through the choose love, that have the choose love mindset, that choose love as they grow older, they are the ones that are going to make sure that everyone is fed, that the homeless are cared for. And by the way, I see this. We have a Choose Love youth group, and I was just on with them last night. And I have to tell you, I usually don't make that meeting. I'm going to make it every single time, because to hear of their ideas, I'm getting goosebumps now to think about the work that these young people in middle and high school are doing, the things that they want to do and create. It gives me a lot of hope. It shows me, okay, this is what it looks like when kids grow up with this ability, and what they want to produce in this world is just beautiful. So yeah, it's a more of a longer term type of play, the Choose Love movement. There is immediate relief, but it's also a longer term play. But honestly, I don't know any other way to fix the problems that we have other than, taking a little bit longer view of it. I know we need to put out fires, but I also know that focusing on the problem and just doing that, which is what we've tended to do, doesn't work either.
Yeah, it seems that modeling love and inclusion. I'm reminded of one of the stories that we have in the wisdom book, and it's one of my favorite ones, where this woman in a small town in Appalachia, saw, and this was prior to the pandemic that this started. She saw kids on the street in a small community, but like at dinner time, they weren't going home. And she thought, my gosh, these kids don't have an opportunity to sit down and eat with one another. So she got her, the idea she was going to have this spaghetti dinner. And she invited a couple kids that she knew, and in fact it was 12, and she invited them over to her house, and they cooked the dinner and just sat around and ate. And then the kids asked, can we do this again? And so she continued doing that. And the word got out that, here was this one individual just inviting people in, young kids. And then people would see her in the grocery store and say, are you shopping for, for dinner? for people, and she would say yes, and then they would contribute and buy food. And it went on and on to the point where kids were saying, can I bring my parents? Can I bring my grandmother? And it had to move from her house. It moved to a community center. And it's just a lovely story that continued even during the pandemic in, a variety of ways.
I love
So,
that.
yeah, and there's so many good stories like that of people. And I'm guessing that that's what you heard last night, Scarlett, that, these people have these extraordinary stories.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Just the creativity in love is amazing. When you come from that space, I feel like, ultimately you're either coming from a point of love or fear, and you can't be in both places at once. And that's something we need to be mindful of as well, especially with everything that's going on in our environment.
So Scarlett, may I ask, you say that you work with this youth group. Is this a group that you worked with a program a few years ago, and they have been doing this for a few years, or was your first exposure to them very recently?
No, they have been doing this for a while, and they come in and out because they're busy, and some have now graduated, but they understand the Choose Love message. They use it in their daily life, the formula, and they want to spread it in the ways that use their gifts and talents. And it's pretty amazing, the creativity that they come up with. One young person is working with boys and girls clubs, following in his older brother's footsteps, by the way, and volunteering to teach Choose Love to them. And we have another Miss Teen Rhode Island, Mia, who is just an incredible person who is working in Rhode Island to spread this message through her platform. We have another young person in Bentonville, Arkansas, who has grown the Choose Love Day as proclaimed by the mayor. Every November 9th is Choose Love Day in Bentonville, Arkansas. That's the home of Walmart. And it's just this young person that agreed to teach it to people younger than she is, and then also works to help plan this huge event. Now it's grown over the last 5 years. It's now thousands of people that come to the square, and they rename the roads leading into the square to the character values of the formula. They've got 23 of 26 schools involved, and they're all have booths showing how they choose love, and they're having a lot of fun, and they have food trucks and balloons, and they use the logo on hats. And I have a clip of Peyton on a stage last year, and she's saying good evening to everybody, and she's saying, and next year we're going to have 26 of 26 schools, just driven, but getting filled. Her bucket is being filled herself. She's having healing and hope within her by helping and being a part of this movement and moving it forward in her own community.
Oh, that's a great story.
Yeah.
Merida, to your hand.
Yeah, I was wondering, I live in Mexico, and I'm wondering, is Choose Love translated? Can it be brought here? What would be needed?
It can absolutely be translated. We have some of our resources translated, but we would love and welcome working with a translator. That's one of the things that I want to do with not only the program, but also my book. I would love to be able to translate that into Spanish. That's how a lot of people start, is by reading my book and then going to the website and finding out more. So yes, I would welcome that if you know anyone who is interested in doing that.
Well, there she is. She can help, definitely.
Yeah.
But the time.
I know it's time. And, we've talked to several people that have been interested over the years in translating into many different languages as they try to bring it into their part of the country. And, it boils down to time and resources on their part as well as ours. And a lot of times it doesn't get done, unfortunately. We're a 501c3, so we give our program away.
Well,
10 years ago, people told me I couldn't do that, that people wouldn't value a free program and that I couldn't keep it going. But here we are 10 years later. So there's got to be something to this.
I think that there is a process that in Mexico, because we participated in a conference, which we do each year, the Encuentro, and it was amazing this year. And I think that Merida could put you into contact with the group that did this simultaneous translation, so that the program that you just showed us, for example, they could put that into Spanish. They did it. Like I was giving my speech and I just kind of, because you have a monitor in front of you, and I was looking to see, my God, it was coming out in Spanish at the same time that I was speaking and doing the presentation. And I've experienced simultaneous translation verbally, but never through the written word like this was done. And so I'm sure that it cost a fair amount, but knowing Encuentro's conference, they don't have that much money. So, it might be very possible for you to be able to do that.
That's amazing.
Possible to find funding probably from other sources as well. So it's well worth looking into, and I think Mexico really needs something like this. And is there like a training process for facilitators or?
So we have free training that's it came from my first presentation 7 years ago, but we have a whole level now of professional development. The whole program is designed so that there's no training required. We were very careful. This is one of the things that kept Jesse from having access to things like this. Sandy Hook had purchased, and a lot of these programs are from for-profit companies and they're very expensive. And so Sandy Hook had purchased a very expensive program, actually from a nonprofit, still expensive, that required extensive teacher training. You have to remember, not all big kids have these skills and tools either. And I didn't have them, and I couldn't teach them to my boys. So, but they couldn't afford to train their teachers. So when I approached them and said, hey, do you have something like this? They said, well, we do, but it never got out of the box. It never got out of the box. And those words, I say, branded on my brain. And I thought, wow, I have to create a solution where there'll be an emotional connection, where there's no training required, where it will get out of the box. So we made it so that the educator learns alongside and practices with the students. With that being said, during COVID, so we had this full, turnkey solution. You could go on, you could get your program at no cost. You could do the online training, which thousands and thousands of educators did, and that was it. But during COVID, we started having schools coming to us saying, look, our educators can't take the 3-hour training online, and they don't have the capacity to figure this out, to sit there, and we need you to lead us through it. Can you create something for us? And so we did. We created all of this professional development. They also had funds for it because the federal government, the state governments actually, I say this is the silver lining of COVID, started recognizing the value of social and emotional learning, and they started funding this professional development. So we created, as requested, all of these classes. So we have that. We have, packages from either literally walking schools through it that really need the help, to just, me giving my presentation, or we're going to actually develop a whole series online. So again, for the schools that don't have a lot of resources, but have a few that want the training, they can get that. So we do. That's a long way of saying we do.
Nice.
Lynn just put a message in the chat about us looking to make December 14th Choose Love Day.
Oh,
And
At
yeah,
the- for us at the charter.
yeah, I'm sure we could, but we could go, but I mean, hopefully if we took that on, we could obviously with you and with both, you know, our communities and trying to involve others, we could do Choose Love Day and, you know, create a program around it. And I mean, December 14th is almost tomorrow for this year. But, you know, we might be able to do something small, but yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea.
you know what?
Nice.
I would love to do that. And this could be something where we also do a campaign. I had a friend that called me the other day and she said she was following a school bus and it just seemed a little gloomy and doomy, and she was sitting there at a stoplight behind it, and she said, I knew they needed more than a wave. So she said, I flashed them a heart, because this is what I always do. And she said their faces lit up. They did it back to her, and the kids, I'm sure the bus driver didn't appreciate this, but you know, from the front of the bus, they came running out to give the hand heart. She said it just, she didn't get a picture of it. I wish she had, but she said it would just lighten the whole thing. And she said, I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to start, instead of just waving to people, I'm going to start giving hand hearts. So maybe for our Choose Love Day, which I would love to do, I'd love to be a part of that. And that would be amazing. I actually, maybe we could get the youth ambassadors involved,
Yeah.
and our other ambassadors. And I would love to maybe do something like, hey, everybody, you know, everybody needs a lift. Let's start sending us little videos or pictures of where you sent a hand heart, maybe little stories, instead of just a wave. Like, step it up one more and send love from yourself to another person. I mean, we talk so much about how important it is to be seen and how people are so lonely and they need to be seen. And so this is a way of saying, like, wow, I see you, and I'm not just waving, I'm sending love. And maybe we could do something that with it too.
And Marge just asked the question. Go ahead, Marge. About
It was just someone, Linda answered it. It was just December 14th. I had forgotten that was the actual date that it
Yes.
happened. We threw out a few dates, but yeah, that makes
Yeah.
so much sense. And I will try to spread it up in Canada. And yeah.
That would be amazing. We have schools in Canada as well. So, you know, and we have some contacts in Canada. So, I'm sure it would be well received. And,
Yeah.
you know, instead of having that day, and there'll be media coverage and everything on it, but we'll be, and it's kind of how I managed Jesse's funeral. I wanted it to be a celebration of life. And so this is what we'll be doing. You know, we'll be celebrating all of the advances that we've made and celebrating love that's come out of it. And actually I've started saying, and just, you know, at the 10-year, people still come up to me and they say, oh, this is just, it must be so horrible. And every time you talk about it, and I say, you know, I can now say that more good has come from that event than bad. And, you know, that's something to be celebrated.
Yeah. You know, I was just thinking of Nemo Patel's, and he does this song, and I can't remember the name of it, but with a young woman from India, and they had created a campaign of felt hearts that they give to one another. And he's created a song around it, and she does the song. And I think we could actually put together a little 30-minute program on December 14th, and just do a little thinking around it. But that song by itself is just so energizing. And to see, you know, how people react when they receive a heart. I remember one of the last times that I've gone to India, I got a heart from somebody who just came up and gave me this heart. And it's just lovely. And I think I got another one during my visit. So it's kind of spread over the country in different places. So that might be something that we can think about as
Yeah.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know Lynn keeps saying that, you know, we could we could make these hearts. Well, I basically can't even have time to do dinner, let alone sitting down and making hearts. But I'm wondering if we can get the folks in India who seem to be very good at pulling this off to help with that for next year. But for this year, we can certainly do something.
We could do
Yes,
the
that's
the hand
beautiful.
heart. We could do the
We
hand
just
heart.
do the hand heart. We don't need to
Yeah.
present
So
it.
we have this dance troupe, this professional dance troupe who's written this whole I think it's like 40-minute dance routine, and they sing songs about nurturing, healing, love, and they've taken the character values and they act them out through bullying scenarios and everything. We're going to film them on Monday, but we've got teachers that have written Choose Love songs for their schools, and they have little kids that have sung it, and we could show videos like that. I mean, there's so much
Yeah.
that we could do.
Okay, let's really think,
That could be really cool.
maybe
Yeah.
30 minutes this year, but
Yeah.
something much more broad following. And I'm also thinking that some of this can be incorporated into Golden Rule Day, because we do an extended programming. We started out for the first few years of actually doing it 24 hours nonstop. But we've changed it a little bit where we do maybe 4 hours and then repeat it continuously, so it goes around the world. So that might be something else to bring in some of that for Golden Rule Day.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I
I'm
love
thinking of having hearts in the snow, so we can do that
Oh.
too.
Yeah.
Have some fun. So
Yeah. But who knows with global climate change, you might
Indoor, we have
might
snow.
not have any snow in Toronto. I don't know.
We
I might
not
have snow.
Yeah.
You might have
You
snow.
might
have snow.
In Mexico.
Uh,
Well, we're really coming to the end, and this is just wonderful. And I think that ever since probably way before August, with Lynn starting to communicate with you, Scarlett, about the Humanitarian Award, it's almost like, okay, now she is a staff member of the charter because we've been doing so much together. But I just love the idea of December 13th. I love, the possibility of
I do too.
maybe, working with Merida about the translation, if you like. But I mean, one of the things most definitely is to figure out a way that we can extend this. I know that you're in so many countries and already, but how is it that teachers can get exposed to what you have to offer curriculum wise? And I don't know if Arn's suggestion or my response to him, which you haven't read yet, about maybe us putting together a course where this might be the point of exposure. And so I was going to start my day today to write to the Charter Education Institute to see if we could sit down and talk about this and get it into play for next year.
Amazing.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you again. And, obviously we'll be in touch.
Yeah,
Yes.
great. Thank you all so much.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Right. Bye-bye.